So you want to buy land in 2026. You want to buy the kind of land you see behind me, raw agricultural land where you can probably homestead or garden or get your family out of the cities. That is what so many people write to me about today. As you guys know, I went through this process starting in 2023 when I found the land you see behind me. It was raw, undeveloped land, and I had no idea I could get a loan for it. Long story short, there's now an Amish barn, chicken coop, all sorts of things on my homestead here. So in this video, I'm going to give you guys a very general overview of how you're going to buy land in 2026, exactly as I did it behind me. There are a lot of different approaches to buying land. I'm actually currently breaking it down in my own series, Unconventional Ways to Buy Farmland, on my Substack, which I will link to below. I do write on my Substack every single week. As I always say, I am a writer first and foremost, so do be sure to follow along with me there, but I also report to you guys about it on here. So for those of you who have never owned land or purchased real estate or lived in the country in a rural setting or anything like that, the hardest part to all of this can be, how do you begin? It can feel very overwhelming. There are a lot of moving parts that go into finding land, buying land, selecting the right land, that type of thing. And as I always say, buying land is a very personal pursuit. Investing in something as large as a house or land is very personal. There's going to be emotion to it. There's not a one-size-fits-all approach to it. I always just want to add that caveat. I can share with you guys what worked for me and what I know to be true because I just went through it myself and it worked out. But again, when it comes to your personal situation, please just always do your own due diligence and understand that there is no one-size-fits-all when it comes to something as personal as building out a homestead. The first thing that you need to do when buying land in 2026 is you need to find the land. So I found the land you see behind me on Zillow. I simply went on Zillow, searched for land and lots near me. I selected that filter on it. I did not want a structure on it, and it presented the lands and lot in the area where I wanted to buy land. Now that brings up the second thing. Where are areas where you should want to buy land? Well, there's going to be two things considered here. I did not want to be far away from civilization. So the land you see behind me is 4 minutes away from a village, 15 minutes away from a small city, and about 35 minutes away from Albany, I guess if you could call that a big city. If you're going to be buying land that is close to cities, you are going to be paying more for the land. So that's just the first thing. If you want to be far away from people, you hate humans, you don't want to see anybody, which I would not advise because it's going to be harder to get people to come to your agro-tourism events and all that, but you're going to get your hands on the cheapest land available simply because you're far away from everything. You're far away from a hospital, you're far away from help, you're far away from anybody knowing what you're doing. If you're going to buy land out in the middle of nowhere, there's also going to be fewer restrictions with what you can do with the land, but again, you're going to be in the middle of nowhere. That is just not what I wanted to do with the land you see behind me. So when you are looking for land on Zillow, on the map, you're going to find a city you want to be near. So for me, I'm from upstate. When people always say to me, oh my God, what the heck led you to upstate New York? I was born here. That's why I subject myself to starting now, no sun until about late April. We all know, we make jokes about it up here. We live in the tundra. It's freezing cold out right now. It's about 32. I knew what I was getting myself into. So you're going to pick a city where you want to be near on Zillow. It's gray. It shows you the city. You're going to look at least 15 minutes outside of the city. If it's a small city, if it's a larger city, probably around 30 plus minutes outside of the city. You're going to look for areas on the map. I'll throw an image on the screen to show you what I mean. You're going to look for an area on the map where it just looks like there's not really a ton of development, either between cities, between towns. That's where you're going to find farmland. That's where you're going to find zoned agricultural residential land. So the land you see behind me is zoned residential agricultural, and the land you see behind me is also in an agricultural zone, an agricultural farming district that was established by New York State, and it is in your best interest to buy land that is zoned in that way because you're going to have the most freedoms with what you get to do with the land that you're buying, which is obviously the goal with the homestead. A lot of people want to have a farm stand. Maybe you want to have workshops. Maybe you want to have a wedding venue. Maybe you want to have agro-tourism tours. All of that is going to be a lot easier if the zoning is ag residential or just plain ag, not to mention the tax breaks and things that you can get if you're on zoned ag land in an ag district. Doing aggy things are numerous and specific to the state and county that you are in. So what happens in New York State is not going to be the same with that stuff as it would be, let's say, in Iowa. So you're going to find the area where you want to find your land. You're going to filter for lots and land, and you're going to see what comes up. Now, a lot of people think land is going to be insanely expensive, and overall, obviously, land is the most expensive it's ever been in our country right now. It's what happens every year as time passes on. I would warn against just assuming it's going to be unaffordable. I disagree with that. I'm in New York State, which people would assume, oh, it's a very expensive state because of New York City, but I'm 4 hours north of it, and actually New York State agricultural farmland is cheaper than agricultural farmland in a state like Florida, which might surprise you. It does change based on obviously supply and demand. So there's going to be a lot of different things that go into how expensive the land is that you're going to be looking for. And I've broken down in other videos kind of how to gauge, what you are looking for in a price range. But if you find land that's not exactly very close to a city center and is raw, meaning it doesn't have all of its utilities plugged in, the utilities I'm talking about are your power source, so being tied into the grid, a septic system for sewage, and your water, a well. You need to have water. Those things are not going to be provided to you by the city if you are out in the middle of nowhere. So buying raw land that doesn't have any of those things on it is going to be a lot cheaper than buying already developed land. So the land you see behind me came with a well. It came with one of the 3 utilities. It was not tied into the grid. It did not have a septic system. It did not have a driveway. It had zilch. Because it had zilch, this land was more affordable than if I had bought vacant land, let's say in Saratoga Springs, which is the city I am near. So that is going to be something you're going to discuss with your partner or your cat or whoever it is about how much money you want to spend on this or how much capital you have available, which brings me to the next very important part of buying land like this in 2026 is you're going to need a loan for it unless you want to pay in cash, unless you have $200,000 in cash laying around that you got from your grandparent when they passed on or something. If that's the case, lucky you. I'm jealous. If that's not the case, there are many different ways to finance raw land. I had no idea that was a possibility when I looked up this land in 2023. I thought I would have to pay cash for it. I was wrong. I ended up finding Farm Credit East. So Farm Credit is a nationwide network of lenders. They specialize in raw land. They specialize in working with people who want to farm. I did not have to provide a farming plan. I did not need prior farming experience to get a loan with them. I just had to go through the usual loan process. And I've written so much about the process with them and recorded a lot of videos about it that I'll also link below for you guys. But it was the same thing. You had to show bank statements, tax returns. You had the option of 20% down. So you did not have a 0% down option with them. But in return, they didn't really care if I farm or not. Whereas with the USDA, which is also an option to people, do note, you're working with the government in that case. There are 0% down, as little as 0% down with the USDA, but there's always a catch to that, which is that you either need to provide a farming plan or you've already farmed for 3 years, or you're going to enter into some apprenticeship type of arrangement with the USDA. And then that way it makes them taking a risk on you with this loan a little more palatable, if you get what I mean. So I had no prior farming experience. So farm credit is what made sense for me. I just wanted a regular bank loan. Like I said, I'm breaking down, there's so many different ways to buy farmland today, from seller financing to state grant and loan programs. Too many to mention, very unconventional options. If you don't think you can qualify for a single loan with farm credit or the USDA, do not assume that that means the road ends for you there. The third thing you're going to need to do if you're going to buy some acreage in 2026, which, do note, you don't need 10 plus acres to call yourself a farmer, and you certainly don't need 10 plus acres to feed your family. The land you see behind me, you can really only see about 4 acres is what you can see behind me. Obviously, you can see that's a lot of freaking land. A lot of people have this misconception, especially if they have only ever lived in urban areas, how big a acre is, and people always say it's a little smaller than a football field. Obviously, a football field, that's huge. That's a lot of space. So there's a lot of people growing all the food their family needs on 1/10 of an acre. There's a lot of people growing all the food their family needs on 1/3 of an acre with surplus to sell at a farm stand or a farmer's market. So trust me, you don't need 20 acres, which is obviously going to make this a little bit cheaper for you. My land I bought was 6.74 acres in total. It's more land than I would ever need. And all the land you see behind me, I'm leaving wild for the pollinators, which I also have covered on here. And I'm also going to start a pumpkin patch in the area you see behind me next year as well. That's why we have some pumpkins out here to decay all winter long and do the process for me after I clear it out a bit in April. There's a lot of pollinators sleeping in that brush behind me right now, so I will not be touching it until late April when everything has awoken, because that was always my plan and my mission for this process. Back to what I was saying. So you're going to pursue getting a loan, getting qualified for a loan. Let's say, assume you're going to do it that way. Like I said, there's other options. You can work with nonprofits and all that, but let's assume you're going to get a loan. while you're waiting to get the official qualification for your loan, you're going to do some due diligence to make sure that the land you're buying is not hiding any secrets from you. I'm not saying everybody out there selling land is trying to screw, the next buyer over, but a transaction's a transaction. Some people are, trying to get out of owning the land because maybe they found something they didn't like on it. Maybe it just wasn't what they had pictured or imagined, and they're probably not going to honestly tell you that in the closing process, unless you pair off with an aging farmer who wants to see their farm live on after them and a legacy type of thing. Those people are out there, but in that case, you wouldn't have a loan. You would be working directly with the farmer. If you want to know where to find those farmers, go to local town ag board meetings, farm bureau meetings. You will find those folks hanging around there that may be very interested in having an heir if their own kids didn't want to assume the farm, which is unfortunately a large problem going on right now, especially the farmers I've talked to around my property. A lot of them over the age of 70 just didn't have kids, or their kids aren't around, their kids moved, their kids went to college, and they're just not interested because farming wasn't exactly promoted. I know I'm a millennial, to my generation in high school, by guidance counselors, was not encouraging you to become a farmer. They were encouraging you to go get a 4-year bachelor's degree, which caused a whole other slew of problems. But you're going to do your due diligence with the land you buy, which there are things you can check before the deal closes to make sure that you have not invested in something bad or in something that you are going to regret. Another caveat I always add is, with investing, there's always going to be risk, even if you've done all of your homework. And it is just important to know that and to not beat yourself up over, let's say, buying land, thinking you did all your homework and suddenly, surprise, there's something wrong with the land. Part of buying land, I would argue, is being an entrepreneur in a way and just kind of embracing what's going to come along for the ride with it. Little mindset tidbit. But there are things that you can do. The first part of your due diligence, to me, would be purchasing a survey with the local town surveyor. They are going to walk the bounds of the property with you and show you, the actual outline, the perimeter of the land you want to buy. But more importantly, they're going to be able to get you onto the land. You can't just traverse land if you find it without either calling a real estate agent or saying, don't do that. These people, do own weaponry in their houses, and they're free to do that. But being able to walk the land with the surveyor, if you hire the town surveyor, they're going to know a lot about the land and the families before you that were near the land and on the land. They're going to be able to point out things like improperly removed stumps, potential sinkholes, garbage, things that you're just not necessarily going to be able to see from the road. One of the best ways to get to know the property personally is to hire a surveyor. And I always say my survey was $600. People usually tell me that that's pretty cheap. Surveys are usually $1,200 or something like that. So maybe budget $1,000 to $2,000 for purchasing the survey with the surveyor. Bonus points if the previous owner had a survey done and can just send you the results of the survey. So always ask the seller if any of that information is available, and that will save you some money. Same thing with a perk test. A percolation test is something you're going to do to find out where you could put in your septic system. So in my case, the previous owner of this land had already purchased a bunch of perk tests and was able to just give me the perk tests. So I didn't have to rebuy them. Again, that can be a couple $1,000s in the end. So, ask the seller, hey, have you tried this? Same thing with drilling for a well. Ask the seller what they have done or haven't done. If they haven't done a lot of those things, I recommend purchasing them before the deal closes, like having the perk test done before the deal closes, having the company come in that would drill a well before the deal closes, and just having initial conversations with them about what to expect or what they feel is a realistic outcome for you on the land that you're thinking about buying. So real quick, before you close on the land, before you're qualified for your loan, before you figure out how you're going to make the land behind you a reality for you and your family, you do need to think about your plan of action for getting physical on your land, meaning there's going to be a lot of heavy lifting, things that are going to go on that you might not expect. I know for me, like coming from an urban area, there can be a lot more movement than I was accustomed to. I was a freelance writer for 10 years. I did a lot of sitting. So you're going to be doing a lot of not sitting. You want to make sure you're equipped, prepared, and comfortable for doing something like that, which is why I'm going to very, very briefly talk to you guys about Camel City Mill work socks. What I love about these is that they have thermoregulation technology, which means they stay cool in the summer and warm in the winter. And as you guys can see, my breath floating away on the screen right now, it is very cold here, and I absolutely need a sock that is going to stay warm and also help with moisture. Sweaty feet is very much a reality in your work boots while you're working your new land you just bought, and you want to make sure you have socks that keep your feet dry, especially in cold temps, especially if you're going to think about homesteading in the Northeast, and Camel City Mill socks is absolutely going to be the perfect option for you. These socks are made with Ironside merino wool, and they are also USA made, which I love to support anyone who makes stuff inside the US. They have double-plated nylon fortification in the heel and toe, which makes them very durable work socks, and Lord knows I need that when I'm taking care of rabbits, chickens, and a garden, all while it's freezing or pouring outside. Their Black Friday sale is now running with up to 40% off as their biggest sale of the year, which makes it a perfect time to fill your sock drawer. And to wrap up this guide on the very general things that you should do if you're thinking about buying land in 2026, which I always say, I hope you do want to buy land in 2026 because we are living through the largest wealth transfer of our lifetimes right now in the form of land and farmland. $24 trillion worth of farmland started changing hands in 2023. So if you're thinking about buying this land, you are actually part of this wealth transfer. And as I report on here, I'd much rather you guys buy it, oh my goodness, than foreign corporations that want to come in and start solar farms and industrial complexes and destroy our environment. So I'd much rather you guys buy it. Last and final things, as you're waiting for your qualification from the lender and the deal's getting ready to close, your perk tests look good, all of that look good, you want to line up some free quotes from people for getting different things installed. So the very first thing you're going to want is a driveway to be able to pull onto your raw land if you have road access. The second thing is you're going to want to have a plan for how you're going to power your homestead. So a lot of people are going off grid. I do have a personal solar panel here. I have nothing against that. I do hear that can just be a little more difficult. If you're thinking about homesteading as a solo female, I don't recommend going off grid necessarily as your first foray into this. I tied into the grid. You guys know my story with that. It was not easy to get the electric company here to actually bring me my utility pole. It took 6 to 7 months to get them to finally come here. It took a lot of phone calls. So if you're planning on tying into the grid, understand it might take half a year for them to actually tie you into the grid. And it's going to take a lot of phone calls, reminders, possibly a little bit of attitude on your part at times. And as I always say, please check with the electric installation company. So for me, it's National Grid. Please check with your electric provider at what that free footage is for tying in. So for me, it's under 500 feet. And I tied into a pole that was 450 feet away, and thank God it was because they covered it. They covered bringing the electricity to the front of the road, then I paid an Amish electrician to bring the electricity underground up into my structure. So be sure to call your electric provision company before you close on the land and ask what that footage is, because you might want to check the distance yourself before you close just to make sure the nearest pole is 1,000 feet away and they tell you it's 300 feet. That could cost a lot. That could cost some thousands of dollars. So absolutely check that. Find a company, an excavation company that you feel comfortable having install a driveway. So for me, that was the Amish. I can never recommend the Amish enough. They've never paid me to recommend them. They just changed my life and were the most skilled craftsmen, professional people I've ever been around, and funny and adorable and amazing. So if you're in the Northeast or Appalachia, just call the Amish. There's your first answer there. But if you're not, get some free quotes from excavation companies about having a driveway installed. They'll make recommendations on if you need culverts in the driveway, and be sure to have the permit pulled from the county. If your land is on a county road, you need to have a permit pulled for your driveway if it connects to that main road. I didn't do that, and I don't know if I started off on like the best foot with the county government here, which isn't in your best interest down the line when you're going to need permits and things. So if you have a driveway put in, get a permit pulled for it. That's all I have to say about that. But yeah, have a company at the ready that you feel is going to do a good job putting your driveway in. Same thing with having the well installed, and same thing with having the septic system installed. Just have different quotes prepared and know what you're going to be doing with tying into the grid or how you're going to be powering your structure. Last thing, a lot of answers to all of this will be found in your town charter or by simply calling the town zoning officer. That is their job to tell you what your land is and is not zoned for. Call this person before you close on your land deal, because you don't want to be surprised and buy the land and think you're going to have a thoroughbred farm, and then your town tells you, oh, you're only allowed 1 horse per 2 acres. In my town, you're only allowed, on my 6.74 acres, I'm only allowed 4 large animals, which means I think it's like 1.6 acres per large animal, which obviously then would mean I can't really have a thoroughbred farm here. I think that's amazing for all the space that these animals should have. So no problem with that. I'm just saying, please do call your zoning office, because you might be surprised at like very random rules and regulations that might be applied to your land that just wouldn't necessarily be common knowledge. Don't let any of this scare you. We really do need people to buy land, even if it's just 2 acres. We desperately need more small farmers in this country. I fully believe we're going to see a revolution in how we farm over the next 20 years. I think the massive commercial farming, massive tractor way of doing things is just not going to be feasible and fade out in a lot of ways. So I support anybody who wants to grow food on a small scale or steward the land, do right by it, and not coat it in pesticides. I applaud you, and I always hope to be a resource to you guys on here. I went through this process. Always ask me questions below, and I've tried to be transparent and cover pretty much everything that has gone on with doing this. And I survived. I'm here and I'm smiling, so it clearly wasn't that bad. So with that, stick around. I have a lot more coming your way, covering things like starting homesteads, investing in raw land, working with Farm Credit East, reporting on solar farming industrial complexes and what is happening to our land out in the country. I'm trying to be a voice to people that might not necessarily be seeing it firsthand. You're going to find all of that here and more, and just me outside screaming in the freezing cold in front of a field. So if you like that, stick around. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Feel free to write in below, tell me where you guys are from. And yeah, I'll be back soon. Bye.